Welcome to Movie of the Year, the only podcast that has the science and the scream and determine what the best movie is of any given year. This season we are going through 2002, and I'm your host, Mike Gravano. This is a special bonus episode because somebody realized we didn't have enough episodes to cover us through the holidays, and we are not going to be competing. We're going to just be hanging out, talking like friends, watching a movie. With me are my friends, Ryan.
Not competing as in we're both automatically tying for first or tying for last.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
It's up to you which one you'll tie for. And Greg.
I'm only ever competing with myself, Mike, and I have yet to win.
Okay,
That's
masturbate
a good
much?
way to be. Oh.
I don't know. But no.
Mike, this is an O2 bonus episode, so clearly it must be about The Pianist or Gangs of New York, two 2002 movies that are not getting their own episode.
That are very
those
big.
are 2002 movies that the fans are flabbergasted are not in the actual bracket. A bracket, again, cannot stress this enough, has 16 movies in it this year.
Hey, you can't watch them all. You can't watch them all. Hollywood sometimes in a year will release as many as 30, 40 movies, and so they can't all be in the bracket.
No. Even when we double the bracket size. But no, we're not doing The Pianist. We're not doing Gangs of New York. We are doing Disney's 2002 Lilo and Stitch. Greg, what is your relationship to Lilo and Stitch?
In the year 2002, I saw the movie Lilo and Stitch one time and said, you know what? That wasn't perfect, but I thought that was pretty good. I liked that little Stitch, and Lilo is a precocious wonder, and I liked the way it looked. And it's weird to put it this way. It's kind of a relaxed Disney movie, and so it was. I appreciated that about it. It didn't work too hard.
And you were a young adult at this time.
Oh
Did
yeah,
you see it on
I was
a date?
21.
You were a
so
YA.
I was probably drunk as I saw
Did you
it.
get an awkward HJ?
I don't know about awkward, but yeah, definitely HJ.
Is there any other kind? Ryan,
I think I saw
what
this.
is your relationship?
I'm pretty sure I saw this movie before. It's possible.
with Greg.
that-
Giving an awkward HJ.
And, I mean, I don't want to copy Greg's
Just act normal.
exact story that I may have been one of the people to see this movie one time in 2002. But that story might be mine as well. I do know that as like a industry leading stock reader of film conversation, watching movies rise and fall, much like the NYSE, New York Stock Exchange. Thank you very much.
Nice.
I know that this movie's clout has risen a lot over the last 10 years of like a forgotten classic, and fuck you if you don't like it. So that's
The previous decade was Emperor's New Groove, and
Yeah,
then this
hell yeah.
decade was Lilo and Stitch.
and I do want to make sure that Chris Sanders, the co-director, co-writer, and voice of Stitch, is upset because he's not stoked that his movie's stock is rising so much over the last 10 years. He's very upset that Frozen came out, and everyone gave Frozen credit for having two girls who were sisters.
Oh
And-
'Cause
yeah,
he kind of did that.
And not Lilo and Stitch. Lilo and Stitch created having two sisters in a movie. So,
It's when you try to think about it, it's crazy how rarely that happens.
for sure. And so, yeah, I like, and, you know, Stitch you see everywhere. I didn't know that there was 4 or 5 sequels / TV shows based on this
3 TV series, 3 movies.
until I looked this up on
Wow.
Disney Plus just to watch the one simple movie that I thought existed. So that, yeah, apparently, even though I was a little old for this at the time, there's a generation that is all Lilo and Stitched out.
Yeah, where I'm sure we've hinted around this throughout all of our seasons, but were you guys Disney kids growing up, and where were you in general in this era?
I was a Disney kid, and now I'm an adult who is a fan of Disney, but
Disney
not
You
kid.
don't want to say Disney adult.
but not a Disney adult, because when
Those are
people say
freaks.
that, they mean something bad.
It's like
And-
it's like saying I like Jimmy Buffett. Like,
Yes.
no, not
but you're not a
compa-
parrot head.
right.
No, but I was in my childhood a huge Disney fan, and like even though I was 21, I mean I saw this movie in the theaters. Like, so that'll give you some idea of what it meant to me.
Yeah, growing up, I think that Disney was it. Like, you sort of got this impression that if it wasn't Disney, it was so much lesser than.
It was Rockadaddle Doo. Rockadoodle Doo.
Rockadoodle Doo was a Don Bluth movie who was a defector of Disney, who did make Land Before Time and American Tail, but also some stinkers. But I knew that American Tail was not Disney and therefore lesser than.
Yeah.
I feel like, and I think that this is sort of like how generations work, is that as I aged out of Disney went away. They were like, well, wait, hold on. Ryan isn't all about this right now?
Exactly.
Why would we even try? And then there's this, like, whatever the opposite of a renaissance is, like a de-renaissance. Right. And Lilo and Stitch is included in that time along with a ton of failures like Atlantis,
Treasure Planet, Atlantis.
Yeah.
What surprised me is looking this up because, where all the perfect age for the Disney Renaissance to hit is the first movie I saw in theaters was Beauty and the Beast. And I remember my little mind being blown.
Yeah, dude.
That Tarzan is part of and this is part of the good Renaissance. It's basically 89 to 98.
Yeah, I think
the Disney Renaissance.
You can tell Mike's different age between me and Greg because Mike's a diehard Hercules fan, and that's like, whoa, you're pushing boundaries right now, buddy.
Yeah,
it's same with Mel Brooks movies. I think shows you what age you were because I'm a Men in Tights defender, and you guys are not.
But we can all three agree that Dead and Loving It is shit. Yes.
Oh gosh, it's so awful.
Okay.
It feels like Leslie Nielsen plus Mel Brooks should be amazing.
But
no. You know what? Let's just stop pussyfooting around, take a quick break, and then come back and talk about Lilo and Stitch.
Hey guys, thank you so much for listening so far. And let me just tell you that everything ahead of this commercial is much better than what came before it. That's my guarantee. While I have you here, let me tell you about a website. It's called yourpopfilter.com. And it's everything you need that's related to Pop Filter. Everything Mike, everything Ryan, everything Greg, everything Cassie, everything is there at yourpopfilter.com. While you're there, go to yourpopfilter.com/Amazon. Make that your new Amazon bookmark and do your shopping from there. That way, we get a little piece of the action and Amazon doesn't. Make sure you're also listening to everything that Pop Filter has to offer, which includes the Superhero Show, a podcast that covers every single TV show that's based on a comic book or comic book property, and Movie of the Year, where we sit down and try and figure out what is the single greatest movie of any given year. That's Superhero Show, that's Movie of the Year, and that's yourpopfilter.com. Rate, subscribe, review, bye!
The directorial debut of Chris Sanders, who also voices Stitch, and Dean Dubois, who would go on to direct How to Train Your Dragon together. Lilo and Stitch tells the age-old tale of mad science experiment gone exactly right. The violent ass escapes to a backwater planet where two sisters are dealing with the death of their parents and getting used to the transition of sewing roles to that of parent and child. Part of Disney's experimenting with making cheaper films, Sanders and Dubois got to fly under the radar in terms of script, tone, and animation style, setting it apart from other Disney films of the era. As two of the stars, Tia Carrere and Jason Scott Lee, were of Hawaiian descent, they helped with rewriting the Hawaiian characters' dialogue in colloquial dialect and added Hawaiian slang. Lilo and Stitch extended into 3 sequel films and 3 TV series and is considered one of Disney Animation's few great successes during their post-Renaissance era in the 2000s. Taste buds, I ask you this. As I said, Lilo and Stitch has a style, animation, humor all on its own. What separates this movie from some of the Disney classics and even some of the Disney movies of its own era?
I feel like it eschews having to be epic all the time while still showing that it's capable. It's interesting that it starts off in the intergalactic Federation or whatever. And so it's
dense sci-fi lore immediately.
Yeah, it's so big, it's so huge, but then it so quickly gets scaled all the way down to this one small family on a small island. And that sort of relaxed, easygoing feeling, I think just makes it feel so different from movies that are about kings and queens and princesses.
Princesses, yes, princesses. I read that, you sort of hinted around, Michael Eisner, CEO at the time, was like, what if we had smaller scale movies?
Yeah, what if this didn't always cost so much?
Clearly a way of saying, these are expensive and they're not making any money. And I gotta say, just going off of what Greg said, the memorable parts of the movie are the non-expensive, non-epic parts of the movie.
It's not the spaceship chase in the end.
No, the first 15 minutes and the last 30 minutes are the worst parts, I think. And there are montages in the second act, but you could sort of also look at the second act as 1 hour-long montage that was incredibly enjoyable because the stakes were set, but not epic, not like world-shatteringly epic. And I was very appreciative of that.
What's interesting about Eisner's take, it both in budget and in style, is they throughout this era they pointed to Dumbo, which was after the budget blowing Snow White and Cinderella and a couple others. They're like,
Fantasia.
can we just make something for super cheap? And so Dumbo was like that. And so this was very similar. And that's the same reason Chris Sanders, coincidence, not he wasn't like, oh, Dumbo did this, but he was like, I don't like the style of backgrounds anybody's doing anymore. I'm going to watercolor like they did in Dumbo.
I think that changed so much, though. And I got this like feeling watching the first bit of it, especially once we get to Hawaii. And I cannot believe how much was built on this feeling. Maybe I like set myself up to just think of things like this. But not only does this not feel like other Disney movies at the time, this feels like a Warner Brothers movie. Like they created a character to be indestructible, inflammable, like to go through all of the shit that every Looney Tune does.
Yes.
And then it was sort of animated in that style, edited in that style, right? Where like we would just wait for the huge crashes and the explosions and stuff, and then we would move on to the point where there's one point at the end where this is all in my head, and Stitch falls from a plane, a spaceship, onto the top of a volcano and then bounces off all the way down volcanoes. That's not Disney. We're not watching Disney at that point. This is like the Disney's first feature-length Looney Tune. And I think that added new blood, that added like new freshness is what separates this movie and sort of makes it the classic that it is.
I think it helps. So Chris Sanders, who was one of the directors, Stitch had lived in his head since 1985 when he tried to pitch it as a kid's book, and nobody wanted it.
Yeah.
Because why would you want to read about Stitch when
Yeah.
you could see him?
Still pictures of Stitch. That's great.
So when they're like, hey, we're going to make cheap movies and tapped the two directors, he was like, I'm finally bringing Stitch into the world. And so I think that he's a gremlin. You said Looney Tunes.
Oh, yeah.
I guess gremlins are also very Looney Tunes, but he felt so Spike or whatever the evil gremlin in Gremlins 2 was.
Yeah, he totally feels like a gremlin or like a weird sort of like twisted koala.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I mean, Joe Dante is the director of both the Gremlins movies, and he is raised by Looney Tunes. Like, he is basically always bringing Looney Tunes to life. He literally made Looney Tunes back in action. So I think all of these are feeding each other. And because Lilo and Stitch was not a princess movie, like it was not, we're going to take on this epic of literature that we don't even have to pay for because it's public domain. Nobody gave a fuck. Like, all right, go do what you want, you know?
And it seems like almost self-consciously set in a cartoon. Like for one big, like, a lot of Disney cartoons, they don't feel at the end of the day like that the setting is supposed to be a cartoon. But in this, and I'll give you for instance, like if somebody just like puts on a disguise, even if they're like an alien creature, as long as it's like a trench coat and a hat, they're hidden.
Or a wig.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a woman at or an alien, a one-eyed alien at a restaurant or luau. He clearly only has one eye is
like
a
yellow.
Wig. Yeah. And all the servers like the one thing that I don't think Disney has ever done, or it doesn't feel Disney, but it feels very Warner Brothers, is when there's a picture of Elvis shown, it's a picture of Elvis.
Yeah.
That is so crazy.
The watercolors mixed with newer cell animation mixed with some live action editing in there and very little CGI because CGI cost too much in O2, so they weren't allowed to use it. Except for, I think, the ship fight at the end. It was supposed to be a jumbo jet, and the one time they went to the city, because cities were too expensive, which is why they picked Hawaii. The one time they went to the city, but 9/11 had just happened, so they're like, well, edit that shit out. So they were allowed.
They thought people
once.
maybe didn't want to see a jumbo jet just flying willy-nilly around a city.
Yeah. And so they're like, well, now it is a spaceship, and it's around a mountain. Can't get mad about flying to mountains, can you?
Did it take you out of it, though, when the budget forced them to just hold toys and you could see fingers in the frame?
Well, no, because at that point, because of the real pictures of Elvis, I was like, you guys do what you want. This is wild.
This is a multimodal presentation.
You know, Mike, what I was thinking? Because sometimes on another show that you're on, Superhero Show, you'll have to leave, and then other characters will come on at the very end of the show.
Yes,
and sometimes they sound like Stitch. Do you have a Stitch?
Oh, I didn't say this is my first time ever seeing this movie, and I think I have a new favorite Disney movie. By the way, I fucking loved this. I had a beatific childlike grin on my face the whole movie. Hobble is fabulous.
Yeah, I figured that was coming. Is it because this is your marriage? You're watching your marriage on screen, Lilo and
yes,
Stitch?
and also because my wife has a very good Stitch that is around the house often, and so my impression is just an impression of her, just like everybody's George H.W. is just Dana Carvey.
And then to find out that Lilo is not Lindsay Lohan was not disappointing.
Do you know when you Google, even on IMDb, that it'll first take you to Lindsay Lohan, and you're like, no, I clearly mean the thing called Lilo.
What are you doing?
The other thing, too, is that in Disney movies of all eras, I would say, they all have a sense of humor. And it's not the Marvel sense of humor, but it's a similar sense of humor to each other, all the Disney movies. And it's not funny. It's not like funny. Like,
no.
You might laugh because you're in a theater with a bunch of people and Lumiere, or Tarzan said something silly. This movie, and it's because of the Looney Tunes of it, the timing, the editing, the structure. This movie is laugh out loud funny multiple times.
Yeah.
And it reminds me the most out of all of Disney's canon. Another one that like was the opposite, had such a hard eye on it, and it had to rework, was Emperor's New Groove. They are so funny in ways that no other Disney movie are. Because this one, it was always under the radar. That one was so under the radar, it never worked. So people were exhausted and sick of it. And so once they had to re-edit it, they're like, I don't give a shit anymore. Do whatever you want.
I mean, I remember 10 years after Emperor's New Groove came out, people were like, did Disney just release this to home video and we didn't know about it? Like, there was no ads for it. Like, it stunk at the box office. And then
people heard that David Spade was in it and they were like, no. Thank you.
Lost and Found 2? I don't think so.
Another part that I feel like is different tonally and feels older Disney to me is New Disney lost a lot of the melancholy. And to me, like, Bambi and Dumbo and Fox and the Hound are so gosh dang depressing. And I think the Looney Tunes is really balanced by the fact that these two sisters, one of which is like 20, one of which is like 4, have lost their parents. And also, like, the very economic realities of actually living in Hawaii are present underneath everything. And that, I think it's like, kids aren't going to notice that stuff, but it feels like the laughs are heightened because you're laughing and whistling through the graveyard style.
Plus, at that point, dude, we were so used to, not just Disney, but all kids' fare having 1 to 2 dead parents. Like, it's just how it worked. And I'm still not exactly sure why, but
I know why.
It does give you
Parents for an adventure.
It gives you that sadness to start with. It gives you that pathos to start with. And then we have to figure out we're already in an extraordinary situation.
And also, it's a literal death of the parents, but childhood is a figurative death of the parents. You go out into the world and you don't have their leadership there all the time, and you have to forge your own identity. And so, like, there is something that's dying as a growing up. And when you start telling your own story, your parents have to die, even if it's not literal. And so that's why I think it happens so much in kids' stories, because it's mirroring to kids that going out into the world and forging their own identity.
See, I get that part for when both parents are dead, but so many had one parent die, which I just think is character writing is hard.
Yes.
And it's easier if we cut half the parents and then they have something to deal with.
And they're not ballsy enough to kill both, which I was when I moved out.
A lot of times,
though, enough Disney movies, guys.
When the one parent dies, the other one disappears into their grief,
into the bottle,
or becomes changed a lot, and so they kind of losing one is experientially a lot like losing both.
Or they disappear into their superhero costume. As the
Do you go try to save the other one?
Number 1 superhero, Saint Canard. I'm talking about Darkwing Duck.
Let's get dangerous and take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to dig into the setting. Taste buds, sci-fi has long used aliens to make a point about colonialism. With Hawaii as a setting, it's hard not to make that connection here. But is the movie really trying to say anything about colonialism? Or is a group of Disney employees wanting to go and live in Hawaii for a year?
I don't know if it's trying to say anything about it, but I think you kind of can't bring up the conversation. You can't bring up the movie, or you can't watch the movie without kind of thinking about it, because Stitch is this lovable war machine. And
kind of like USA.
And he shows up, and like the movie is at pains to show that the people who come and visit the island are kind of like aliens to Lilo. Anyway, she takes pictures of them. They don't really say anything. She kind of treats them like they're aliens, which they are. Everyone that comes to Hawaii comes from somewhere else. But it seems like almost like, what if things hadn't broken so bad between Hawaii and the first white people that like showed up? What if instead of wanting to conquer, they had found a way to be lovable or something? I don't know. It felt like there's too many connections.
There's
to
a lot of
feel like something
connections.
is there.
And a character that I think gives nuance to this child's animation thing about a war-loving alien is Pleakley is the one who all the aliens are like, well, we should protect Earth, kind of like how we're all like, well, we should protect Hawaii. But the one who cares the most about it is a like feckless, weak,
bureaucratic,
like, it's like, okay, but if you care too much, you're going to be a Pleakley about it. Like,
yeah,
we
and
don't
the thing
want
he
that.
cares about is mosquitoes, right? Which he has no like personal contact with until the movie starts, and which he learns that he actually does not like because they're miserable. He seems like
mosquitoes are things that flood in, suck you dry, and then leave.
Yeah, totally.
Is this one of those things like you do a draft and then you realize it, so you pick it up, or that there's just so much of white colonialism in Hawaii in everybody's DNA, so this just oozed out of it unintentionally?
Look, I think that in 2022 we should be so stoked that they hired Tia Carrere and Jason Scott Lee not just to do voices, but to help them with the dialogue. I think that
isn't that amazing?
That's
that
brilliant
is, yeah.
and progressive, and maybe more credit that we can give your average 2002 movie. Did the artist just want to go and study Hawaii? Probably. It's not our job to. That's uninteresting if that's the case.
Right.
What we're left with, though, is some confusing things as to, Lilo specifically loving these tourists, like Greg said, and then loving this alien, making sure this alien comes in with never any shit going. Stitch gets screamed at for destroying everything. None of the tourists ever do. The one fat guy loses his ice cream at one point, but that's about the worst
he just
that happens.
can't eat his mint chip. Not at one point, Ryan.
Multiple
Not just
points.
at one point.
And
the
we
real
do
tragedy of this movie.
We do
is
get
this
a little
sunburnt man.
We do get a little bit of that like economic colonialism, though, right?
Oh, yeah.
With like Nani going like from place to place. It's like it gets almost like. I know it's like first thought stuff, but it like almost gets a little White Lotus-y, like the way that she like there's no place for her in her home anymore because all these people have come and displaced her. She can't like find anywhere to be on the island because it's too expensive to live in her own home anymore.
That and it's not that like white people are coming in and taking, or what is news radio from Insomnia call them, the lower 48. There's not lower 48s coming in to take those jobs. It's just that in non-tourist seasons, like that's basically what the jobs are there for, is that we become a giant tourist trap. And
somebody from outside the island comes and says this part of the beach now is right in front of this hotel, and so it belongs to this hotel. Mm-hmm. And it's like someone from somewhere else does that and tells you that the beach that you grew up 5 minutes away from suddenly is like not open to you anymore, and that must just be the most devastating feeling.
But what does that have to do with
of when it
colonialism?
happens.
And it's made even more manifest that somebody not from the island tells Nani she cannot raise her little sister.
Yeah. And I mean,
because it's not up to the standards of this government bureaucracy.
At the end, the Galactic Federation, which seems to involve all planets but Earth, comes out and says, all right, now Hawaii can be the prison for this alien. Like, we're also going to dictate what Hawaii is.
So, because it's a kid's movie and not really about this, the movie doesn't, like, have a neat answer.
But, like, the creative forces went to Kauai to, like, study it. And one thing that you notice when you go to Hawaii is that, like, you turn on the radio and people talk openly about Hawaiian independence. And they talk openly about how, like, we kind of are not cool with all these people who are not from here always being around here and dictating what our lives are like. So, like, you can't just go to Hawaii and not be aware of that. You're in contact with it kind of like as soon as you get there. And so I don't think, even if they didn't decide to do this, like, it's going to express itself through you because it changes you to go to Hawaii and hear that stuff.
I mean,
And-
Nani's main job that we see her at the longest, which is only for a scene, but still the longest, is a job where she, as a Hawaiian, has to go and act more Hawaiian. She has to Hawaiian it up, be performatively Hawaiian for the people. We only really see when she is a server at a luau, we really only see her dealing with Jungo and Pleakley, the two aliens.
Jabba with an M, Ryan.
Jumba and Pleakley. But they are rude-ass White Lotus customers, just like any of the other white people would be if they were in the scene as well.
They are dressed very similar to Nedry and Dachshund from Jurassic Park.
Right.
I mean, the whole alien races, they all have an extremely martial aspect to them. Like the kind of, to say fascistic is probably a little bit strong, but like, why is a scientist wearing a coat with epaulettes? Like, even the scientist looks like a warrior, and that's like his dress uniform that he wears all the time. So like, this stuff is not something that we're like wish casting into the movie. It feels like the movie, it just doesn't like tie it all together and really say much about it in the end. I don't think. I think it kind of just puts it out there, almost like to give kids something to kind of consider. And
it's using symbolism, right? It has to use the most basic things in society to get us to understand its message, right? So like we want to think of this person as a scientist, but a specific kind of scientist, lab coat, but like militaristic, you know? And so I understand all of these shortcuts, these symbolistic shortcuts that the writers and the filmmakers are using, but then you got to like, but why are these shortcuts? Why do these shortcuts exist? You know, like this is all foundational stuff of let's send them there. Let's send the alien to the alien place.
And what I like is that trip to Hawaii definitely changed it, is because I forget the original city. It was going to be like New York or LA, and they were told that's too expensive to draw.
Well,
but
labor and union, unions.
Labor union.
Yeah.
I mean, the further away it is from LA proper, the more you're going to have to pay the artist.
Listen,
union.
if we hire these people, we're going to have to pay them a living wage. Boo.
That's why they should always draw Toronto.
Ohana, which means
Toronto
family,
drawn for New York,
was not part of the script at all until they went to do like land studies. And then the tour guide was just like talking about Hawaii to them. And that clearly made a fucking impact on Chris Sanders and co. Because that became the whole point of the movie.
The Ohana
And at least
thing?
in episode 114 of Lilo and Stitch, the TV show, it also comes up there. My guess is that phrase comes up in every episode of the TV show.
But I mean,
I think it's probably like they're kind of like right at the point of resolution for every episode. They're like, well, you know what you forgot there? Ohana. It means family.
What's also, it doesn't just mean family. That's Olive Garden means family. Ohana it is specifically extended family, like your chosen family.
Oh, that's
so
nice.
It's even more complicated than just Ohana means family.
Do you guys also think it's not a coincidence that Ohana sounds like Kohana, Corona, and that's what means family in Fast and Furious?
It's not a coincidence.
Lilo
Fast
and
Furious.
Stitch, Fast and Furious.
Oh shit!
Hobbs
Lilo
and
is
Shaw.
fast. Stitch is. It's all connected. Well, that's all the time we have to talk about the setting. We're gonna take a quick break, and when we come back, more. Hola, Filterinos. I just wanted to interrupt real briefly and say thank you for listening. Thank you for your support. If you want to support us a little more directly, you can go to patreon.com/yourpopfilter. There, depending on what tier you pick, $1 a month, $5 a month. If you're crazy, anything more than $5 a month, don't do that. You can get extra content. There's extra shows, extra series, behind-the-scenes stuff. You could pay for Ryan to draw you a picture. I can write you a poem. You can get the shirts off our very own backs. All of that and so much more over at patreon.com/yourpopfilter. While you're on the internet, you should check out Shady Monk. He does all the tunes you've been listening to. He's on Bandcamp, he's on Spotify, SoundCloud, wherever kids get their music these days that I'm too old to know. Shady Monk lives there. You can probably follow him on Twitter and Instagram as well. That's Shady Monk. Wherever you get music, check him out. Taste buds, the original story of Lilo and Stitch had an alien gangster escaping his home planet and landing on Earth. But the filmmakers decided it was hard to get people to root for a criminal. They changed Stitch to a newborn clone, a science experiment gone right. How does this one little tweak change the message of the movie?
it makes it a little more formulaic, I have to say, because like very friendly war machine is kind of like, that's pretty tropey. Having
It's like Frankenstein.
Space gangster, yeah, it's Frankenstein. It's specifically it's Johnny Five. It's Iron Giant. There was one recently about like a motorcycle that a kid finds that is like made for war, but he befriends. And
should we be talking about that? Whatever that is.
Yeah, that sounds dope.
Yeah, dude.
But space gangster who befriends little girl. I don't know, that to me
That
that's
sounds like a mid-career Martin Lawrence movie that I'd be super into.
I would only accept it if he was full 1940s noir, like the suit. Yeah, lots of sheen.
I got a pizza here for robbery homicide.
She's got
see?
gams up to here.
I think though what's so important and the order of things happening in the creation of a movie. And any movie is crazy, but especially this one of like, oh, we didn't even know what Ohana was until 10 seconds before it aired in theaters. Like,
yeah,
what the fuck
we were
are you guys
rewriting the
doing?
script.
But the aspect of him being a clone means that he's not ditching another family to have this newfound family.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And I think that helps a lot, that he is coming from nothing, and that like that breaks our heart. Is, you know, like how many orphan stories do we have as well? It's the War Machine is part of it is too, but like there were no parents. You know, his only parent is a guy in a coat with beakers. Probably,
and that's so important because she doesn't have parents.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
The scientist was probably taking one beaker and pouring it into another beaker, and then pouring them back and forth, which is how science works.
That's kind of hot.
Designed him in his trial. He designed him to be an indestructible, unstoppable master
terrorist.
of chaos.
I mean, like,
yeah.
not to put too fine a point on it, he was designed to be a terrorist. He's supposed to go and terrorize and mess up a city.
Did you guys see in that first scene when they introduced Stitch to the Galactic Federation, the date on the calendar was January 6th?
No
yeah,
way.
It was supposed to be a whole
Where
invasion
would
right
Stitch
there.
What are
have
the
been?
chances of that?
It's just Stitch and Jay Johnston, man.
January Stitch. Stitch. That's hard. man.
Sometimes I wish I could give points.
But yeah, and then I think that the ultimate climax of the movie, despite multiple fallings from spaceships, like every character falls from a different spaceship 3 times in the last 30 minutes, is Stitch saying, I figured out what family was. They're my found family, and
Yeah.
I'm ready to get handcuffed and go to prison.
Hey guys, I can talk now because the plot needs me too.
Also, indestructible, inflammable, and way smarter than anybody else.
Yes.
And what being smart means is developing language at the right time in the movie.
I gotta say, isn't it I think it's the worst when the alien finally learns how to speak in sentences. I don't mind at first when the alien's just learning how to speak a few words.
It's
but by the
adorable.
time they turn the corner and they're just conversing like a person, I'm done with them.
When I get my Stitch tattoo, in words around it, it's going to clearly mark this is the part of the movie where he cannot fully talk yet, so therefore is cuter.
Could you imagine if Chewbacca suddenly started conversing in human speech? We would turn our hearts away from him.
Hello.
Yeah, we would be done with him. We'd be like, no, Chewbacca, get out of here. We don't want to hear from you anymore.
I know, but like the cool thing about the original movies and not the episode 9 when he so clearly should have died was that he was the 8th character. That's where Chewbacca belongs, not the number 1 character where you get so freaked out that you have to make him say, I'll be right here.
He could have been like, Stitch here.
You want Chewie to say that?
Yeah.
That guy,
And I'm
that
like,
guy
"What?"
clearly like wanted to do that voice, right? Like as
Yeah.
much as he had the character in mind for a long time, he's like,
100%.
I really
he
wa-
walked around the kitchen and just be like, oh, I'm out of Fruity Pebbles.
and it's
Okay,
kind of
gotta
a
get my
basic ass
milk."
voice.
Yeah.
Like,
if
that's
Mike can
done.
do it, yes. It's stupid.
That's the only voice I can do is Meatwad, and this is just slightly more intelligent Meatwad.
This guy's no Bobcat Goldthwait. What do you think of the fact that Stitch has become the Disney stand-in for the Emperor? I think he's more popular now as like on Disney memorabilia as Emperor Palpatine than he ever was.
Wait, really?
In
What does
Excuse
that
me?
mean? I've not seen. What does that mean? I've not seen any of this.
Oh, because like all the Disney characters, since they bought Star Wars, they all like all the Star Wars characters have some Disney analog. So like Goofy is
Okay.
always Darth Vader, and Mickey's always Luke Skywalker.
Goofy always gave me Darth Vader vibes when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Isn't that
makes sense.
true? Isn't that true? That one really
Well,
works.
If you've seen a Goofy movie, you know there are daddy issues between Max and Goofy. Max should clearly be Luke Skywalker, but I know he's not as famous as Mickey Mouse.
Dude, you know what I figured out just today? I was looking at the cover for a very Goofy movie, and I was like, damn, Goofy has like a fucking son. I am such a goofier person than Goofy is. Like, I have no kid. Goofy, like, it fucking is like raising a child.
Well, I think that there's a lot of Max raising Goofy, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
Okay,
and
yeah.
I don't want to be this guy.
If you're
but
getting
it's
close
a
to the
Goofy
text
movie
of the film.
and an extremely Goofy movie. There's a very Goofy movie.
Also,
Mike,
incredible
do me a
sequel
favor. Could you
naming.
just shut the hell up?
Incredible sequel naming. Instead of Empire Strikes Back, if Star Wars 2 was called Extremely Star Wars, just throw extremely into the title. Extremely Godfather instead of Godfather Part 2.
Whoa, just how Godfather is this?
Yeah, that's a little too
Extremely.
Godfather. How many oranges is he going to fit in his mouth in this one?
Did you guys hear about the uproar on Twitter a couple years ago about this movie?
No.
So there was a group of people who were saying that this was the single worst Disney movie of all time.
No way.
And the reason they were saying
that's
that
The Great Mouse Detective.
is there a sequel to that? What would that be called?
The Extremely Great Mouse Detective.
Wow, he is extremely great at being a mouse detective. That's
The
a line
worst
from the
Disney
movie.
movie is The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Continue.
Wow.
What? That has Esmeralda, my wife and girlfriend, at the same time. You shut your mouth.
They said that it's the reason why this is the worst Disney movie is because Lilo is a fucking cunt who never is reprimanded for how she acts.
Yeah,
and,
she's a boss bitch.
And people freaked out. And there was a couple things that happened. One, it's crazy how it's always the characters of color who get this. And how there's no Disney child who ever acts normal or
Right.
like well
The whole
behaved.
point
She's
of
a
Disney,
4-year-old orphan.
while they're making millions of dollars, is to say, hey, freaks, it's okay to be a freak, freaks.
As long as you give us money.
What also came out is the amount of autistic people saying how much they relate to Lilo in this movie. Like how she handles other people when she's that age. Just like
Oh, wow.
what it's like to make friends when you're that age. It's like they all related to him. And I just to go out on a limb and say all kids movies must show well-behaved kids, that makes Lilo and Stitch the worst movie of all time.
Did Bean Dad say that?
I'm
That
pretty
seems like a real
It
Bean
was
Dad
Bean
thing
Dad.
to say.
It was
I'm
Kevin
pretty
Bean
sure
Dad.
this whole movie is based on the episode of The Simpsons where Bart finds that lizard, Bart Jr., and raises it. So I think that if we don't criticize that episode of The Simpsons, and Bart Simpson was never criticized for being rude.
Is that the episode where they had to bring cougars in to kill the lizards and then gorillas to kill and then the city was overrun with gorillas? But I mean, like, I guess that's true if you only watch one scene where Lilo attacks her friend. And still,
Nani is always yelling at her to get her act together.
but like where the scene where Lilo says, "I understand if you have to leave." Like, I know
Heartbreaking.
why you act the way you do. Talking
Yeah.
about Stitch, but also talking about herself.
Yeah.
Shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up. You two cried.
Shut the fuck up.
He's got no parents, and she knows exactly what that's like. He needs to be loved for who he is, not what he is.
And she's not mad at him for that. She's accepting of him. She's like, I know why you destroy everything. And the most
Speed
toddler thing that
round.
Stitch does is, I'm going to build a perfect replication of San Francisco only to be Godzilla in that town.
Oh man, but
That
he
is
was
the
so
best.
happy when he did that.
Seriously.
Yeah, because it's the coolest. I will say again, speed round. Lilo and Stitch form a dramaturgical dyad, but if you had to choose one, are you a Stitch bitch or a Lilo lad?
Lilo lad for sure.
I think
Lilo
so.
steals the show, man. You show up for Stitch, but you stay for Lilo.
Yeah, I think that watching, like, she is the, I guess, Dean Martin to his Jerry Lewis, if I could pick the most modern reference possible. And, like,
Relevant, yes.
the goofy stuff is funny, but watching the reactions to the goofy stuff is funnier.
I think when you're a child, you're a Stitch bitch, but then when you're no longer a child, you put your Stitch bitch things away.
As the Bible told us.
The voice, the head, the earrings. Does Cobra Bubbles look like a bitch?
They could have just like they don't have to make him look like Ving Rhames, right? Like they could have drawn him.
Laws of animation, Greg. They had to make him look like.
Yeah, they had to.
Why did he not have a Band-Aid on the back of his head?
Lazy animators.
And at some point, there couldn't have been a briefcase that he opens up and is just enamored by the light inside.
Again, this is lazy references.
I think
you could
it's-
have gone so much more.
If you're not our age, though, it's sort of hard to explain movies like Pulp Fiction how there legally had to be a reference in
Yes.
everything that came out over the next 20 years.
Mhm. We're just getting out of it, and now people are popping in all their Hateful Eight references. Having Stitch in that kennel felt like a pretty dark reference to The Thing.
That was
Is that
the
reference
thing.
a passing one, or can the movie help us understand this?
I mean, think of how he's the same thing as The Thing, right? He like just shows up. He can like shapeshift. He seems to be the perfect killing machine. But the way those dogs were pressed into the corner, they very clearly were referencing that very messed up scene from The Thing, where The Thing like explodes all over a bunch of dogs who are freaking out in real life.
The one thing that we missed is that the dogs are scared just because of how Stitch looks. That's judgmental. What we needed to see is the dog that Stitch had exploded right before the camera cuts to that scene.
By the way, those dogs are the only like creatures in the entire movie who realize that Stitch is not a dog.
Yeah.
Even though Stitch looks nothing like a dog, never acts like a dog.
Well, that's cartoon rules.
Yeah, that's like why this is a more cartoony cartoon than most Disney cartoons.
Also, is it like what Nani has to do at her job is performative Hawaiian. He's pushing in his arms to be performative dog. It's all the
very
same.
true.
I loved when he was just like, look, I got 2 other arms and a spine and antennae. See how I'm not a dog? I know I was very dog-like before.
Hold on,
But
what kind of dog is this?
You weren't. You were a giant wingless bat, bro. You were not a dog at all.
Does this movie argue that kids do better with responsibilities given to them?
Definitely. I think we ought to have kids that still work in the factories.
I don't know why they stopped that. Also, where do all factories go? Bring it back, Biden.
But yeah, once she has the responsibility of raising up little Stitch, she gets her own act together, and that's kind of what Nani's going through too, right? Because she's 20, like mourning the loss of her parents and trying to no longer like have a little sister, but instead have basically a daughter.
There's not enough said about like her terrible life, her ruined childhood, because she is sort of still a child. But that scene where after Stitch leaves and then Lilo comes downstairs the next day and Nani's just in there drinking coffee, tears in her eyes, knowing that Lilo's about to be taken away. You're fucking 19 and this is what you're dealing with. This is your Wednesday morning.
This movie rules. And finally, it's heavily hinted. Did Cobra Bubbles and the Grand Councilwoman bone in 1973?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, dude. They got freaky.
Did you guys read that the way that they came up with all the aliens is to just redesign every Disney character of all time?
What, really?
I didn't really think about it until somebody stood up and an alien looked exactly like Tigger. And
yeah, I saw the Tigger one. And then also, like, if you think about it, even Stitch kind of looks like Oswald. They're like their original cartoon rabbit. That they never,
their Wesley Wabbit.
Yeah.
Is that the guy they traded for Al Michaels? Do you remember that?
For Al Michaels? Is that what you said?
Explain that, Ryan.
Disney had owned ABC, which had Monday Night Football. ESPN wanted Al Michaels. I think I'm getting this right. But they own the rights to Oswald, the original Disney cartoon. So they traded Oswald back to Disney for the rights to Al Michaels to announce football games.
And Disney immediately started selling Oswald merchandise.
Yeah. In California Adventure, there's that one kiosk right in the front, and I love it. I haven't bought anything there.
Oh, as far as kiosks go, one of my favorite kiosks.
It's a great kiosk.
An important part of being an adult who goes to Disneyland is never buying anything, but like looking very closely at all the kiosks to see what sort of merchandise one might buy.
Man, if I was rich, I would buy the stupidest shit.
If you're going to check out a kiosk, the way to do it is to make sure that your hands are clasped behind your back or covering your fanny pack for fear of burglars.
Burglars love to prey on those who look at kiosks. That is all the time we have. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, more. That is all the time we have to discuss Lilo and Stitch, this first of, who knows, several bonus episodes of 2002.
Gangs of New York, The Pianist.
Yes, will not be discussed. I know we didn't prepare for this, but do you guys have recommendations if you liked Lilo and Stitch and want something different? You got one off the top of your nog?
Greg took mine. Just to, I have to be honest, guys. I laughed a lot and really loved about 45 minutes of this movie. I don't think it was. I would not call this a great movie. I may not even call this a good movie. I think that the flaws sort of outweigh the rockiness of the forced into their stakes. Still, like, this was supposed to be low stakes, but still, like, the last 30 minutes killed me. I think that this was all done so much better in the aforementioned by Greg, the Iron Giant, a movie that is this same thing, a lonely kid befriends an absolute force of nature
Tank.
war machine. Yeah, alien, and doesn't have a lot of this stuff. So Iron Giant.
Greg?
I'm going to go with also the aforementioned by me, sort of like from the forgotten collection of Disney, but I think a superior movie to this is Emperor's New Groove. Emperor's New Groove is so funny, so much funnier than I think any other Disney movie is, and it's different, and yet it kind of has the same, maybe like a little bit lower stakes, or it's not as popular, or it just doesn't feel like the same pressures are on that movie that are on like everything else that Disney does if it's led by a Disney princess. And it's just really neat, and it's got a look that is like all its own. So check it out.
David
Emperor's New
Spade
Groove.
and Patrick Warburton at the top of their game.
Patrick Warburton, it like delivers probably
Steals the
4
show.
or 5 like literal laugh out loud funny lines, and then the bad guy is like the most likable, enjoyable, least effective bad guy of any movie of all time.
I feel like, you know how like I knew that Mike had a Stitch based on his voices? I feel like I should have a putty, right? I feel like
Yeah,
I
for
should have
sure.
I'm going to start working on a Patrick Warburton.
It's a great D&D character voice because it's just so fun to do. It makes you want to role play.
When your voice always sounds like Putty, Ryan, I don't know if you have to search for a Putty.
I'm trying to just sound normal.
Mine is Little Monsters, the 1980-something
Wow.
Fred Savage, Howie Mandel.
Woo!
Another weird little kid befriends a blue monster, and young Mike loved that shit.
I have seen that movie more times than I have seen Citizen Kane.
Man, I rented that and Wizard so often as
Oh,
a child,
dude,
and then
we're a
just haven't
Savage
seen
fan.
either. We were a Savage family, both in how we treated each other and the things we rented. All right, that is our Lilo and Stitch show. Coming up this season, there will be Catch Me If You Can, Russian Art, Chicago, and so much more. Until then, keep watching those movies.
Well, that is very, very funny, or very sad, and perhaps now you have something to think about, or very problematic, and perhaps we have something to think about. But in any event, I'm sure you have some reaction to what you're listening to, so why not check us out on the social media? You can go to Instagram or Twitter and find us at YourPopFilter. Email contacts@YourPopFilter. Hey, everybody, keep watching them movies.